2015 we decided we're going to do something for it practically, so we went ahead and looked for different territories around the world where starting new country is possible, and we found place between Croatia and Serbia called now Liberland. It's 7 square kilometers of land, beautiful plot, and for us it's important element of building a new country, because according to Montevideo criteria you actually need a plot of land to start a country. You can of course build different societies, but this plot of land was very special. It was not claimed by any other country, and it's still not claimed by any other country outside of Liberland. That's kind of very exciting, and I'm just right now actually having this discussion with the reporter from Radio Free Europe, and there will be, I think, very nice article about the whole history of not claiming this territory by our neighbors. And if you think about it, this planet is pretty big, and we have only a couple places which are quite free. I mean, one of them is not too far from here. Monaco has a reasonable tax rate. Liechtenstein is one of the most prosperous countries in the world you can find, and it also has a very reasonable government. But why these places are so tiny? We've got all this planet, and unfortunately these good governments like Singapore or like Hong Kong are very tiny places on this huge planet. So why don't we simply take a piece of land and experiment with the way that place is governed? And we've got these great technologies now. Blockchain is one of them. So our aim at the beginning was simply to start the freest country in the world, to open up more freedom and more options for people to choose from, and utilize the latest governance technologies that are, I would say, growing now with the DAOs all around the world. And these options are, finally, we've got the right technology to do that. And at the beginning of Liberland, we said that the objective of the founders of the state is to build a country where honest people can prosper without being oppressed by governments, making their lives unpleasant through the burden of unnecessary restriction and taxes. That was the first press statement that Liberland made. So on 13th of April 2015, which by the way was the birthday of Thomas Jefferson, we wanted to invoke the spirit of American Revolution on that date, we declared Liberland, and we just went there. It was only 3 of us, and we were expecting that maybe something like 20,000 people will apply for citizenship by the end of the year, and we will have a nice small nation. But we actually got 20,000 in the first day, and then by the end of the week we had 200,000, and right now we have something like 800,000 applications for citizenship. So it's a huge nation by now, with people all around the world that somehow support Liberland. Of course, one thing is to apply online to become citizen, but the other thing is actually come to Liberland and do something, become active part of the community, which is what truly builds the country. But I'm still very excited, that we have this core of, let's say, 7,000 people that are actively supportive and building Liberland with us.
How many people do you currently live in Liberland?
Well, let me get to that. Of course, that's one of the challenging things, and the powers that be recognize very well. That's, of course, also one of those things which they can give us a hard time in building a new country. But we are going in a, I would say, very smart way about it. And this year especially, things are moving to the next level in this regard as well. But first of all, I think it's very important to have the right principes and the right constitution and right separation of powers. So we start basically from making the ideal country, and we make sure that that ideal governance system does have the right path to attain all the elements of statehood. So what we decided, we combined the elements, a little bit of Swiss democracy, a little bit of US Constitution, some meritocracy from Singapore, and of course all these classical ideas from the libertarian thinkers are built into our constitution. Plus we actually have included the voluntary tax system. So not just that taxes are actually voluntary, but you also get something in return when you pay them, which are 2 very important elements which I believe are simply missing today. People are paying taxes and the tax office usually doesn't even say thank you. We wanted to change that. And we wanted to limit our government only to take care of the basic roles of the government, just like the founding fathers of US believe basically that the government only should make sure that there is enough security, there is justice, and that there is diplomacy. And we would like the private sector to take care of all the other things. And I truly believe, that it's much better to let private sector take care of schools than making the governments, trying to educate people. You also don't buy bread from government. Why you should buy education for your kids from government? It's a very strange, I think, concept. But many people, have the feeling that that somehow the government has to take care of this. But I don't think so. I don't follow that path. And we want to try it out in Liberland, not just, for example, with schooling, but also with healthcare system. We believe that the private healthcare system, if it's not over-regulated, can do much better than a public-run one. So that's it. And then, as I mentioned, we also have some elements of Swiss democracy. We have public veto built into our system. That means majority of citizens can get rid of any regulation or law that they don't like, which I truly believe is a great way to make sure that the number of laws don't overgrow, plus they don't really go against the majority. Because the laws in our system are generated by people that pay taxes. So the more taxes you pay, the bigger is your say. But on the other hand, we have this counterbalance that the laws cannot go against the majority. But majority cannot dictate the laws of the country, which I think is another important element for successful country. And we have, I would say, very smart system of justice. It's also based on this merit system that we are building. And we are using some of the protocol called ULEX, which is copied from the international arbitration systems. But it's another cool thing, which when incorporated fully into blockchain, which is the second stage of development of what we are doing, probably by the end of this year, I think will be pretty cool thing, because you literally get like a blockchain dispute resolution system connected with a country, but it's going to be all running on smart contracts. So that's another important part of what we are doing. So what we did, we actually used Polkadot substrate to build what we have done. We have actually 80% of this project is already finished. We are finalizing or fine-tuning some elements. The MVP is already running. And what it is actually, like if you think about it, you put energy on one end, people pay taxes, and at the other end, you get more freedom on this planet. It is literally, I would say, like the most useful DAO that you can get, right? Like there are DAOs, I don't know, to manage NFTs or whatever, but our DAO is something where you put in money on one end, and on the other hand, you get more freedom, and you get sovereignty, which is another important thing, because what we did, we basically tokenized sovereignty with Liberland. So the tokens that you're getting when you pay taxes do represent the share of the country, something which you can never buy in other countries, right? Something which is kind of guarded by the elite, and they are the ones, or the oligarchy that is running the country and making sure that basically that citizens are more of a subjects to the state. But with Liberland, you are literally the owner of the country you're living in, which I think is quite important. So there is another element. Of course, one of the important elements is diplomacy. With that, we have been working quite hard. We've got representative offices in more than 100 countries around the world. We actually have diplomatic relations now with 8 countries, and we're expanding it. Every quarter of the year, we get one more country. For example, we signed collaboration agreement with Haiti last year. I was officially invited as well to El Salvador for the launch of Bitcoin City, which I believe is a great project. We were in a couple other Caribbean countries, and we will announce it fairly soon when we get the business there finalized. And we're working hard in Serbia and in Croatia to get more recognition and more, I would say, more friendship right now, because of course we're doing something which is not completely in line what these countries are used to, but we can bring enormous benefit to both countries. Actually, there is an economic study that expects that we will bring as much as 1% of economic growth to these 2 countries. So we can actually, to the region where 500,000 people left and they seek job in Germany, we're bringing 800,000 back, and we can bring them enormous economic boost. And we are working also in European Parliament. We are working with US congressmen and senators. That was the event a year and a half ago. I think we had 10 of them. That was great event. And we're working with separate US states for the recognition of Liberland. So we got the process up and going in 3 US states, which is, I think, important part of getting Liberland recognized by the United States as a country. And what we're also doing, it's good to know what we're going to build in Liberland. So we teamed up with Vit Architects, and everybody is using now this buzzword, metaverse. But we started this long before metaverse buzzword even existed, because we really wanted to show what we want to build in Liberland, or at least give some reasonable urban plan to start with. Of course, Liberland as a country will not build practically some buildings. We also believe that free market should take care of it, but it's very good to have some sort of initial plan of how the streets will be laid out. So Vit Architects are actually, I found out they're the most prestigious or most cited architectural studio in the world media, so I think it's a great partner for us. If you haven't heard about them, for example, Beijing Airport is a fantastic project that they have recently finished. And they're helping us not just with that, but they're also partnering with us on building the metaverse, so the fully immersive environment where people will be able to basically walk through the cadastral maps of Liberland, which I think is also pretty cool. So we're building, before anything gets built in Liberland, we're also making a 3D plan of what we are planning to build. And I think it's also a good way for investors, private investors, to see what they're planning to put inside of Liberland before it gets, and they can see what the neighbors are putting there. So without too much urban planning, without too much state control, we can get, I think, nice results. And there is a nice video online. You can get a fly through, but I didn't want to lose time with that. But right now we are dealing with some practical steps. We need to actually settle Liberland and start building there something and make people live there. And it's a bit of a challenge. There are a couple of challenges, and I will go through them, but I will tell you also how we're dealing with it. First of all, we started to build a village right next to Liberland. It's called the Ark, and it's on the other side of the Danube, and that's where the social events are happening, and that's where also where we are gathering all the equipment necessary for settlement of Liberland. And finally, we don't have COVID this year. Somehow it disappeared, so we can actually bring much more people to this place and have a very nice festival, and I will tell you about it a little bit later. And so this is our base in Serbia, and we are also building free trade zone. We're building this bigger ship called Bitcoin Freedom that we want to have as a hotel parked in Liberland when we start the settlement project, and we are building houseboats, which is a project which I'm in love with. Somehow I wanted to build houseboats before Liberland, but now it becomes a practicality. We teamed up with the Serbian company that does them, and that's the best way to basically settle Liberland to start with. So this is a 2-bedroom place which is completely autonomous, and we can have multiple of them. And we are also getting this company now called Liber Homes to come and help us with these tiny homes to put them in Liberland. But first we gather them in this village in Serbia, and then we will be ready to move them anytime when the diplomatic situation allows to Liberland as well. And this was the first year of Floating Man Festival. You can see we've got some really beautiful sandy beaches around Liberland. And it was just a couple of people, but it has been growing. This was actually this year's anniversary, and that's the place that we have there. But it has been growing, and we had 1,200 people coming to last year Floating Man Festival, despite the fact that there was only 500 people limit. Somehow they didn't arrest us for that. But we managed to bring 1,200 people together, but we are aiming now without COVID to a much higher number. We would like to have 2,000 to 3,000 people coming to visit Liberland and have fun during the Floating Man Festival. So we are very much welcome to join us. It's going to be between 11th and 15th of August. And we've got some famous local bands, but they are really good bands. You don't have to worry that they're singing in Croatian and Serbian. But of course, we're trying to bring as many locals as well to join our activities with the settlement as well. And one more thing, of course, it is very easy to become e-resident. It only takes a couple of minutes, and then it just takes a little bit more effort to become citizen by somehow getting involved with Liberland. And of course, building a country is a multifaceted project, so we need anybody that knows, for example, right now we're looking into making lightning payments available for the people that are coming to the festival. And simply, I think government shouldn't organize festivals, so I don't really have time for this, but I would love to have somebody that organizes the lightning payments for the festival. Just one example. But of course, anybody that thinks this is a fun project and they could be part of it, we are happy to have you. And now the e-residency cards actually do have a regular photo, and it looks much more like an ID, which is kind of cool because it has much more use. And the passports, right now they have just diplomatic ones, but we also have regular ones. And it's pretty cool because, for example, Kraken recognizes it for KYC. So you can also have your passport and use it for other purposes. And of course, in the countries where we have some diplomatic status, you can already use it for some traveling, but that's not the strongest feature of the Liberland passport. And that's it from me, actually. So if you have some questions, maybe I'm still able to answer them, right? If we have.
We'll do the Q&A after.
Okay. Okay.
But actually, you have some time, so go for it.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. Please.
The same question what the lady asked, but so what's up with the settlement? Like, why can't you guys do that?
Well, the challenge is Croatia. Like so far, like last year, for example, when we haven't made too much PR, people were camping, and they were camping there for multiple weeks, and we didn't have any problem. But there is some sort of friction because Croatia doesn't claim this territory, but they're also not very happy about us being there, and that kind of goes down over the time, and we're really trying to present them all the economic benefits. But there are like two leadership within the Ministry of Interior and within the local police. One kind of likes us, one doesn't. So when Liberland started, hundreds of people were arrested just for going to Liberland. We haven't had any arrests for the last 4 years, actually, which is a much better situation. But I also wanted to finish the governance. I wanted to make sure that that the system of the constitution and also the blockchain governance systems are already up and running before we seriously settle Liberland, and that is coming to fruition right now. So we're ready for it. But I have to tell you, Of course, I have no doubt that there will be some sort of issue with Croatia when we seriously start to settle Liberland, not just camp it there. But the matter of the fact is that in none of the Croatian maps, Liberland is part of Croatia. And when they're arresting people, they actually arrest them for leaving Croatia. Or when they used to arrest them. So there is, again, some sort of friction, but what kind of fun would it be if there was no obstacle in building a country? Of course, there must be some sort of challenge in that, and right now I'm actually kind of happy that they're protecting the territory for us in a way as well, like nobody else is able to claim it, and but they don't like to, they don't like to. When I say that, they don't really like. Please.
Do you have any separatist groups like Northern Liberland? Let's try to settle it first. Maybe start one.
No. That's the cool thing. I mean, I really have to recommend you the State in the Third Millennia by Prince Hans Adam of Liechtenstein, where he argues that every single municipality should have the freedom for self-determination. That's the one that I think you read, right? And it's kind of great, and we don't have that in our constitution like Liechtenstein yet, but we're seriously considering it. Like it's like one last missing element. But right, Liberland is really small, and when we have the Northern Liberland basically making its own diplomacy, I think it's difficult, to include this at the very beginning of such a small country like Liberland. But we're considering it, and right now we might get some serious support from some organized groups, and we're really thinking about giving them even more freedom and more sovereignty. But it's really difficult in our system because we're already trying to make it as broad as possible for regular citizens. But for example, possibility to opt out of the criminal code maybe or something like that, that's an option. But again, that's not really, it's not the priority number one.
What is the official language?
It's Liberlandish actually, and yeah, and we were always kind of joking that the best Liberlandish is spoken by those Croatian policemen when they try to speak English, because it's usually like their first time trying to speak English. So, but that's a language that is being created, and I'm actually a little bit serious about it, because we do for the last 4 or 5 years we built the Liberland dictionary. And the most words are actually added by Bogi Wozniak, our vice president. He's really good in like building up the Liberlandish dictionary, but sometimes I add word myself. So we are listening to, let's say, proper Liberlandish right now.
And about taxes, you said it's voluntary, but are you talking about private people? So for them, they're
Well, it's something which I haven't, and thank you for actually telling this. You know, I've completely forgot to tell you about the ecosystem of Liberland companies, which I think is very exciting thing, which is happening for the last 4 or 5 years. But what is most exciting then, since last month, we can fully bank them, which is pretty cool. We've got a bank in Costa Rica that decided to recognize Liberland entities, and that is very helpful for growing of the project. But at the same time, we also have this network of free trade zones, which can be used by Liberland companies. So we've got around, let's say, 200 Liberland companies that are somehow functioning, and the ecosystem, I think, will grow now much stronger when the banking is available. And of course, as with any taxes, like taxes in Liberland are voluntary, so you can choose how much you want to pay. The great thing, you can also decide to which particular part of the budget you want to add the funds, and you get something in return, which I think is natural.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Vit, for doing this. I believe the founding fathers of the US and Singapore would be proud that you are doing this. My question is about land. Let's say that some people want to buy a land to build a factory or put a house there. What is the idea to sell and buy the land?
Well, merits do represent ideal share in the land right now, and I think at some point right now, when the settlement will be a bit, let's say, it will be an adventurous event. We are going to do a little bit of homesteading options for people as well. But what we want to do first is basically test selling the land inside of this metaverse, which will not be connected to physical land. And then when it goes correct, we would like to use this similar platform like this metaverse to selling of the land. And there will be basically auctions for every plot of land, and the revenue of these auctions will go to the government. And if the government makes too much money, it will actually distribute dividends back to merit holders. But it's, again, that's like a little bit far out right now. I think we're still a couple years away from that.
Now I'm interested about prices. Because right now, like if I see that correctly, like if you got 800,000 applications, and probably like it's gonna be 2 million soon, like, and you only got 7 hectares of land, so it's actually already by now only 1 square meter per person. So
Yeah, we will be the most overpopulated place on the planet. You're right. But that doesn't, of course, mean that all Liberlanders will live in Liberland. And I think it's actually cool. The more citizenships you have, the more options you have. So we don't need to pack everybody inside of Liberland. And of course, like the reality will be on the opposite scale of that. I think, like, of course, like getting things like intentional communities itself are difficult, but of course, it's much easier when you have 1 million people on a mailing list, and you can. But on the other hand, I'm not worried about overpopulation in Liberland. That's again not my biggest worry. My mosquitoes might be bigger challenge, but this year we actually don't have any.
okay.
So
And another question: do you actually have some criteria, like of giving people application, like giving all residency for the application, or does every application also receive residency?
well, we have got this two-tier program. First, you become e-resident, and we actually do make sure that you're not coming from some criminal background or terrorist organization. And we also basically ask you, we don't accept communists and fascists, basically. That's what we said at the very beginning. So we would like to have a nice nation of people that don't intentionally steal from each other. Well, we just ask people, like, people are their own judges. So sometimes I get like an email, sorry, you know, because I've been in a communist party for 10 years, I don't think I can apply for Liberland citizenship. And I think maybe you changed your mind about the whole thing. But, and we actually removed it from the website recently, but we still ask about, like, from the description, but we still ask people about their, like, background and if they respect private property of other people, for example, when you apply for e-residency. But it's just 10 questions. It really takes like 5 minutes to go through it. Yes. Well, this is the thing. We're actually not in center of the EU. We are on the edge of the EU. We're between Serbia and Croatia, where right now there is this.
Serbia is not in the EU.
Yes.
But most likely because of Kosovo, Serbia will not be really.
Well, I think there is.
They will not be in EU in the next 5 years.
Well, we don't know, but you know, but I am also one of those people that believe that joining of Serbia into the EU is unlikely. So there is a great joke, but I'm not going to go into that, by the foreign minister of Serbia. But you know, but he also believes basically that Serbia will never join the EU, the former foreign minister. And it seems like this will be kind of the, you know, the division line between the West and East, or whatever you call it. So we're kind of outside of the influence, or we're in the middle of the two places. But I think it's a nice strategic place. It is kind of heart of Europe, but outside of the EU. And Croatia actually joined EU without Liberland. Like, if you look into all the Croatia maps that Croatia provided to the EU about its borders, Liberland was not included.